for his time. Ms. Massie, you're recognized.
I thank the chairwoman, and thank you for having this hearing. I want to set one thing straight. It is true that President Biden has expressed his desire to ban all semi-automatic weapons. And most of the firearms sold today and most of the firearms owned today are semi-automatic weapons. So I think it's disingenuous to say that you don't want to ban guns or take them from people who are law-abiding citizens. The president didn't make an exception for law-abiding citizens when he said he wanted to ban semi-automatic weapons. Mr. Lott, you unearthed something that's very disturbing to me in your oral testimony. You said that the NICS background check results in racially disparate outcomes, that if you're a black male or Hispanic male, that you would be more likely to be denied, a law-abiding male, more likely to be denied the purchase of a firearm when you go to purchase it legally from a gun store. Why do you think that is? And what can we do in the next Congress to get the data to confirm that or to dispel that myth, if it is not true?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. It's a very simple point. You'll constantly hear things like there are 3.8 million dangerous, prohibited people that have been stopped from buying guns because of background checks. So that's simply false. What they should say is that there are 3.8 million initial denials, and about 99% of those are mistakes. It's one thing to stop a felon from buying a gun. It's another thing to stop somebody simply because they have a roughly phonetically similar name and similar birthday from being able to go and buy a gun. And the problem is that people tend to have names similar to others in their racial groups. Hispanics tend to have names similar to other Hispanics. Blacks tend to have names similar to other blacks. And the problem is that 18% of Hispanic males have a felony background. 34% of black males have a felony background. And the problem is, for whites, it's like 6%. For Asians, it's like 3%. And the problem that creates is that law-abiding, good black males or Hispanic males are more likely to have their names and birthdays confused with somebody who's prohibited because of this broad brush of using roughly phonetically similar names and birthdays, and it causes errors. Now, you can appeal. The problem is that it's a complicated process to appeal those mistakes, and it costs about $3,000 on up. And so what you've essentially done is good, law-abiding people who want to go and protect themselves and their family, poor and middle-income class people, are being prevented from buying guns through no fault of their own simply because they have a name similar to somebody who's prohibited. And there's a simple way of fixing this. If private companies did background checks in the same way that the federal government does, they would be sued out of existence under federal law if they had an error rate that was 1/100th the error rate that the federal government has. Why not simply require that the federal government has to meet the same standards for doing background checks that private companies have to meet? Now, when I was working in the Department of Justice, I tried to go and get the data on the error rates by race, but the FBI fought against us getting that at every step of the way that was there.
Isn't it true that that data is collected on every 4473 form that's filled out at a gun store?
Exactly.
Race.
You know the race, you know the sex of everybody there. We know who applied to get it to begin with. We know the rejection rate, even at the first stage, where the National BATF office goes through it. About 94% of the false positive cases are dropped at the first. There are 5 stages of review. About 94% are dropped at the first stage of review. There's no lawyers involved. They're simply double-checking the paperwork. The problem is they don't go back and tell people about the mistakes that were there. They just go, you're denied, and that's it. And you have to then go and appeal to go and get a mistake fixed then at that point.
Can you tell us about the laws that are on the books in all 50 states that resemble red flag laws, but actually help the person who may be a danger to themselves or others?
So they go by different names. Baker Act in California, 5150, in Florida, 5150 in California. What happens is if you are concerned that somebody's a danger to themselves or others, you go to the police will evaluate. If they have reasonable suspicion, they'll take the person into a psychiatric expert If psychiatric experts can have 24 to 72 hours, depending on the state, to evaluate the person, at that point, if they think that there's a reasonable suspicion, there can be an immediate hearing. If the person can't afford a lawyer, one is provided for them at that time, and evidence can be cross-examined at that point. The thing is, at that point, judges have a broad range of options. They could say, look, I'm concerned. If you go and see a psychiatric expert after a week or 2 weeks, we will evaluate. They could take away the person's guns. Or in the ultimate thing, because about 99% of these cases are used for suicide concerns with red flag laws, you could involuntarily commit the person. The problem with red flag laws is no psychiatric experts, no mental health care experts are involved in the process. The only thing that the judge sees is a written complaint by maybe one person that's there. If you really believe somebody's suicidal, or you really believe somebody's a danger to themselves or others, just simply taking away their guns is not a serious solution to the problem there. If somebody's really suicidal, you're telling me there are not other ways that somebody can go and commit suicide? But the way these laws are set up is they want you to think if you only take away a person's guns, problem solved. There's no problem at that point. You know, people can drive a car into a crowded sidewalk that's there and go and kill people if they're really a danger to other people.
So before I yield back, just to clear that up, there are laws on the books in all 50 states that
And the
allow
federal
involuntary commitment and the taking of guns. But the difference between those laws is there's due process and the person receives treatment, whereas red flag laws, you just take the person's gun and leave them without treatment, and there's no due process. I yield back.
I could analyze this discourse, but I simply say 5150, red flag laws that I happen to support, but none counter the idea that the person is alive. When someone is shot with a gun, a child, an assault weapon, they're dead, and they can't be brought back. I'm happy to yield to the gentlelady from Georgia.